What's going on, good people? This is the Common Man Nate Lewis back with a brand new Common Take. And this one was meant to be put up the other day. I do apologize. I just really quickly wanted to go over the reaction to CM Punk's disclosed pay from UFC 203. Now, for those who are not aware, CM Punk made $500,000 for his 2 minute showing that he had at the pay per view, and it has caused a uproar from many other fight fans and also fighters. And just really wanted to kind of put my 2 cents in on this scenario, on this situation that we have occurring. Now, there have been no official pay-per-view buy numbers that are out, but then again, UFC does not release their pay-per-view numbers for the public. So it's always kind of speculation. There are some people in the industry who have inside information and they can make a very good, very accurate guess on what the pay-per-view buys are. And it's still early, but the predictions have come in between that this pay-per-view did between 475,000 buys. And on some of the higher range, we even have it up as high as 800,000. Now, I know some of you who are not familiar or don't generally care about how well a pay-per-view sells may be going, well, that's a kind of a rangy disparity between the two numbers. And the numbers that have been announced and projected by different MMA writers, Dave Meltzer and some of the others, they base it based off of some Google Trends they look at, and also some of these reporters have inside information from sales from companies such as DirecTV or Dish Network or the iPay-per-view sold directly off UFC TV. So they're able to approximate based off of the trends and what they hear from major cable and satellite providers, and can kind of give you a generalized area. And it's still too soon to tell exactly what those numbers are. But for the sake of my argument and the sake of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go in between that range, and I'm going to put this in perspective for you. Most of you listening to this hopefully have a job. At your job, you get paid your hourly or your salary raise, and your job is to basically help the corporation make money. That's basically what you're there. You're hired to help the company make money. If you were an employee and you were one of the better employees and you are a active member and attributing to the increase in revenue for your company, as a general rule, you'll want to get paid what your value is to the company. You would want to get paid more than someone who doesn't generate the revenue or bring money into the company. And this is kind of where I have a problem with how some of the fighters are taking the Punk disclosed pay and making it such a major deal that Punk, who has never competed before, got the contract that he's gotten. Now, I'm going to back up real quick for a minute. For those who are unfamiliar with how the pay structure typically works for the UFC, there's tiers to it. I believe now the base pay, this is the minimum that you get paid for competing in a UFC event. For a long time it was 8-8. What 8-8 means is you would get 8,000 if you showed up to the event, weighed in, and competed. Now the compete part, there's little twists and turns with that, but generally that's the idea. It's called a show pay. You show up ready to fight. You got 8,000. The other part of that 8 is if you won your fight. So it's a win bonus. So for example, if I competed and I fought at 185 pounds and I weighed in at 185 pounds and I won my fight, I leave with $16,000. That's how the pay structure works on a very base pay. Now there's some fighters who after a certain number of fights get paid more, and so that 8-8 can become a 16-16 or a 20-20 or what have you. Some of your higher tier fighters obviously have a much bigger base pay, and some even have it work to where there is no win bonus. They get paid, we'll say $600,000 no matter what, win or lose, as long as they show up, make weight. That's what they make. Now, some fighters have come out against Punk making his $500,000, and I'm pretty sure you heard my dog barking in the background there. But getting back on point, there are, as I was saying, there are some fighters who don't have that win bonus. They just have a straight pay. That's what they get for showing up and competing. People like Anderson Silva, I believe Overeem had a no win bonus with him as well. There's fighters that get that, and then you have the what you saw in the last pay per view 202, Conor and Nate 3 million, 2 million, and a percentage of what we call pay per view buys. Now, pay per view points, I should say. Pay per view points is something that's not. There's not a lot of info on it other than we'll say this: if you are a fighter that gets pay per view points, when you compete at a pay per view, if the pay per view achieves a certain level of buys, if a certain number of people buy a pay per view, you get, and this is just for purposes of this sake, you get $1 for every buy if it sells over 250,000 buys. If it sells over 350,000 buys, you get $2. Over 4, you get 3, and go so forth. Those numbers I'm pulling out. There's nothing really official on that, but that's for that sake. So Punk's 500,000 obviously is on a higher scale of what other fighters make, and it is believed that Punk also got pay-per-view percentage points. So on top of the 500,000 he'll get, depending on how well this show does, he'll get more on top of that. Now, I've already made the analogy that you work at your job. If you feel you do a better job than someone else, you should be paid more than that person. 9 times out of 10, that's not what happens. There are people who work with a coworker who's a complete idiot, a dumb fuck, one of those types that are just, you don't understand how this person has a job. And that person may make the exact same, or if not more than you. That's just life. Now, I bring that up because, yes, Punk has not competed in any form of hand-to-hand combat. However, this pay-per-view, UFC 203, was expected that without him on this card, was to do anywhere between 250 and at the very most 325,000 pay-per-view buys. And that's projected just based off of the year UFC is having and past numbers drawn by the 4 people competing in the main and co-main event. So it stands to reason anything above that range can be attributed to the fact that CM Punk and his name value brought to that card. Now, if I was to take the very low estimate that I believe Dave Meltzer provided, which is that this show did 475,000 buys, and even he has come out and said it probably did more than this. That's a difference of about $4.5 million in terms of revenue from pay-per-view that CM Punk has brought to the show. If I made the difference of $4.5 million for a company, I would expect to make a lot more than everybody else. And that's just fact. And what some of these fighters, let me not harpoon so much on the fighters. I get exactly where they're coming from. As a whole, MMA fighters are, I believe, grossly underpaid. But I really do think that a lot of this anger that you see from fighters, and I don't want to really name any fighters in particular. I'm sure you've seen them. I think their anger is misguided. The system itself is what's messed up, not what Punk was able to negotiate. I'll give a quick example. At this current job that I'm at right now, when I first got hired, I was coming from a job where I was making less than $8. I'm gonna just keep it real. I was making less than $8. I got my offer for the current job that I'm at with a different role than I have right now, and I got a substantial increase from what I was making to when I first got hired here, and I jumped all over it. Yes, I will take that. That sounds good to me. A couple months go by, I get really good at my job, and I'm starting to kind of piece together what other people are making, and I realize, wow, I kind of lowball myself here. And I'm getting a raise within the company, and kind of then looking around to see what everyone else has made. And, I made to a point where I should be happy with the pay I got. But had I taken the time and negotiated myself in a better paying position from the beginning, I would be a lot happier now with what I'm making. Point is, some of these fighters are looking at Punk and what he was able to do with his name brand and his negotiating power. And I don't want to say there's some hating going on, but seriously, there's some hating going on. And my feeling is this. you may want to work for the best company, which is UFC. And it's your dream to fight in the UFC. You have dreams of being champion and headlining pay-per-views and making millions and millions of dollars. And the UFC comes, they say, hey, we want to sign you. We want to put you on this fight card. Here's a contract for a 12 and 12. That's on you for taking that 12 and 12. Maybe if you'd have pushed a little bit harder, maybe you could have got this added into the contract, this higher base pay, whatever the case may be, you signed the contract that you are currently on. And yes, as a whole, the pay structure is so undercut for fighters. But it is still up to you for you to sign that contract. You cannot be mad that someone else signed a contract that much better than yours. And we see it with the numbers. Like I said, at the very least, the low estimates on each one of the variations that you can see, I should say, from what this pay-per-view would have done without Punk to what it would have done with Punk, what Punk brought to the show on the very low end of the scale, and what he may have run on the high end of the scale. We're talking an additional somewhere between $4.5 to upwards of $10.5 million extra this man brought in. If you want to bring in that type of money, if you want to have in that type of base pay, at the end of the day, you have to bring the eyeballs. You have to put the asses in the seats. You have to make people pull money out of their wallets and pay to see you. Even then, if you really look at it, Punk was underpaid for the value he brought to the show. Conor McGregor was underpaid for the value he brought to his show. Nate Diaz, Ronda Rousey, John Jones. You can go on and on and on about how even the top tier guys who make the money that you don't seem to complain about them making are underpaid. And this is spread across the board. That's in every facet of life. That's true at my job. That's true at your job. That's true for the NBA players who you saw the insane amount of money being thrown at NBA players. They're underpaid too. That's what we live in. That's society as we know it. The job of the corporation, the job of the company is to make as much profit as possible. And one of the biggest things that you can control is labor. So while some jobs may be better paying than others, trust me, that company has done everything in its power to control its labor and to basically underpay its employees. That's how it goes. That's life. So my message to those who are upset about Punk and his pay, or fighters that are upset about Punk and what he made, look, it is life. If you're not happy in your lane, do something to change the lane that you're in. And I was just going to leave it at that, ladies and gentlemen, but there is one more piece of business I want to quickly get into, and that's the return of the bad guy, Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen is back, ladies and gentlemen. He has signed a deal with Bellator MMA. For those who don't know what Bellator MMA is, I don't typically blame you, but they are probably the second biggest MMA promotion in the world. Their fights are on Spike TV. I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've at least seen a fight or a card from Bellator. They've had some of the biggest drawing fights on television. Kimbo versus Shamrock, Kimbo and Dada 5000, Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner. They have those freak show aspect fights to them, but they also have some really rising talent if you look at it. Your current UFC lightweight champion, Eddie Alvarez, is a Bellator alum, as they would say. So anyway, Chael Sonnen is back. We're not sure who his first opponent is. I believe he mentioned something about Tito Ortiz. We'll have to wait and see what weight class he competes in, what Bellator has plans for him. I personally am a huge Chael Sonnen fan. If you're unfamiliar with Chael Sonnen, probably one of his biggest claims to fame is during the time that Anderson Silva was on an absolute tear. He had a fight with Chael Sonnen that went 5 rounds, in which 4.5 of those rounds was all Chael Sonnen beating the holy hell out of Anderson Silva. Now, eventually he lost that fight, but he was thought to be the one guy. There was one guy that was going to beat Anderson Silva. It was thought to be Chael Sonnen. Now, he's had some problems, passing a couple tests. He'll be happy to tell you all about that. But me, as a fight fan, I am so happy Chael Sonnen is back. Cannot wait to see what they do next. And I will be staying tuned, as will you. We shall see. And for that, I'm going to wrap it up today. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you head up to commonmanpodcast.com. It gives you all the links to how to listen to the show. There's some articles up there. Last big one I really did was about over CM Punk. I'm currently working on one on the AJ Styles. AJ Styles, basically, has there ever been anyone on a 3-year run as great as AJ Styles? I'm still working on that article. I will get that up as soon as possible. I do promise that. You can head over to Facebook, like the fan page, Common Man Podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at Common Man Pod. That's at Common Man Pod. And finally, look, you've heard me talk about it a few times. I've wanted to make a change in my life. I wasn't happy with the way I looked, wasn't happy with the way I felt. And I turned to one program, Herbalife, and that has completely changed everything around for me. Herbalife is the #1 protein and meal replacement supplement company in the world. They provide awesome shakes. They have other products such as their Liftoff product, which is a personal favorite of mine. Look, stop drinking the Red Bull. Stop drinking the Kickstarter. Get you a Liftoff. Plenty of energy. It's good for you, packed full of vitamin C, and it really gives you the energy to get you going. I have lost 30 pounds on Herbalife. I'm happy to tell you about it. Look, don't just take my word for it. Head to the link that's in the description. Try out the 3-day trial. If you're not happy with your results, look, you're doing something wrong in your life. This is the best product on the market. Give it a shot. And with that, fans, I hope you have an amazing, amazing weekend. Peace and chicken grease.